The first thing I need to get out of the way here is I love the Tony Hawk franchise. The 7 within the Neversoft era, and even a select few ports and spin-off titles, are probably some of the most fun I've had even to this day. Sure, some of the mainline games were of varying quality, but chances are, if you've never seen so much as a frame of the franchise, but you're into games that test your timing and reflexes, and want something with a killer soundtrack, you can pick up any of these games and have a fantastic time. It's one of those franchises that caught on pretty quick with its easy-to-learn but difficult to master arcade style of gameplay that even to this day has me hooked. Even though Activision is doing its absolute best to bury the legacy of this once massive franchise with its shutdown of Vicarious Visions and completely scrapping a planned remake of the 3rd and 4th Pro Skater games, there's still a sizable audience for the series. And if you think the online community is dead, well, go check out Rethawed. It's an excellent follow-up to Thug Pro that allows die-hard fans of the franchise to not only test their skills against each other, but also play through virtually every single level ever made within the mainline games. So what does any of this have to do with the N64 ports? Well, up until the 6th gen, there was a point in time when the console version of any game you were interested in playing mattered a great deal more than just the frame rate and resolution it ran in.
Inside is a deadly donut.
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was released in 1999 for the PS1 and nearly blew the doors off the hinges of the gaming world. With its undeniable popularity, and of course, with how much money it was already making for Activision, let's be real, the next logical step was, of course, seeing how they could make the game more widely available for people who didn't own a PlayStation. However, as the old saying goes, there's no such thing as a free lunch. In order to get the original game to fit on a much smaller storage format, sacrifices had to be made. Only 8 of the 10 songs featured on the original PlayStation version made the cut, and at a point in time where MP3s were still a relatively new method of audio compression, which forced developers to utilize a far less efficient codec, the remaining songs were chopped and screwed to hell and back to get them to fit on the limited storage space.
Mother of God, it's all
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater for the Nintendo 64.
Get used to hearing these tracks on a loop because while it's not as bad in the first game, it gets so much worse in later entries. Chances are you'll probably find a pretentious self-proclaimed music expert who thinks this is a lo-fi masterpiece. Speaking of audio, ambience is almost completely non-existent. So if the heavily compressed soundtrack starts to make you feel like you're going a little insane after prolonged exposure, well, get used to hearing the sound of your wheels on the f***ing pavement. Textures were also compressed heavily to the point where everything is a blurred, smudgy mess that might make you wonder if someone broke into your house and smeared Vaseline all over your TV. And the draw distance isn't any better. In fact, it only gets worse as the series progresses. Remember when I said the consoles had limited storage? Well, at the beginning of every game in the franchise, at least up until Pro Skater 4, there was like an epic skater montage showing off like live action footage of every skater totally shredding to some badass tunes. In the case of Pro Skater 1, I guess they thought a punk song about police brutality would get you hyped to play the game, but you wouldn't know that playing on this blue hunk of plastic because not only did they keep a small segment of the song on loop with no lyrics, instead of a cool cutscene to hype the player up, we get this piece of shit instead. At the beginning, you get to bob your heads in the first 3 seconds of the iconic Rebel Taxi theme on a loop. Fortunately, it's forgivable considering it's legitimately catchy despite missing the last minute or so of the song. However, thanks to the complete lack of loading screens, we get to blaze through the selection menu and jump straight into the gameplay. Since character customization is completely non-existent in this game, we're going to play as the funny Brazilian man, Bro Boomstick. Speaking of customization, one of the things I actually dig about the board selection is how relatively simple it is. You have your board graphics, your wheel colors, and they even let you tighten or loosen your trucks depending on your preference. Personally, I prefer to keep them loose. Right from the get-go, you might be telling yourself, hey, this doesn't look all that bad actually. You might also be forgiven for thinking the games would improve in visual fidelity with each title. But the sad reality is, this is about as good as it's going to get. The biggest advantage the first Tony Hawk game had over the latter two is the smaller, more condensed levels because it allowed the engine to render most of, if not all of the levels at one time. Sure, the textures are compressed to no end and a lot of visual effects from the PS1 version were dumbed down, but for the most part, it's not a bad looking game. Where the game suffers, unfortunately, is in the sound department. I swear, N64 ports are partially responsible for inventing crust punk because the audio is crusty as f***. Oh, yeah, and speaking of crusty, make sure you keep your game cartridges in a relatively cool, dry place, because after playing for about a half hour, it was at that point the game kinda shat itself.
crusty.
Beyond the sound effects and soundtrack being trimmed down a good bit, the levels are fully intact and each level has the same exact goals the PS1 and Dreamcast versions have. It's a relatively simple formula with 5 goals per level, 2 high scores, collect skate, and break or activate 5 items unique to each level, such as breaking boxes, opening dam valves, and even smashing cop cars. Relax, liberals, it's called dark humor. The most fun challenge out of all 5, however, is not only locating, but getting to the hidden tapes in every level. Well, with the exception of of that one, which was completely out in the open. Are they f***ing stupid? I suppose they removed the tapes from the 1 and 2 remakes because otherwise the Fine Bros would have made a sequel to Kids React to Tapes. You're also able to put your initials in the game if you achieve a high enough score, which was a lot of fun whenever you had friends over and wanted to see if you could top each other. No, not like that. Since I'm likely never coming back to this, here are my initials.
Ass!
It's also worth mentioning the competitions, which more or less remain the same for the next several games aside from the score requirements. As you progress, your stats automatically go up, and you get more boards to pick from. But that's more or less where the rewards stop. Remember when I said the cartridge space was extremely limited? Well, there are no FMVs to be found in this, or any of the other Tony Hawks released for the platform. And that's a shame, because not only did the opening FMVs in the PS1 and Dreamcast versions get you hyped for the game, you also got a bail compilation for getting every medal in every competition. If you're good enough to get gold in all 3, you even get a short skate video unique to each professional skater. It was honestly really cool, and was plenty of incentive to go back and clear every goal in competition with each skater. So it's an incredible shame we don't get to see that. You know what you get instead of a cool skate video? That's right. You get a shitty special trick tutorial after you've already finished the f***ing game! I suppose it's kinda cool, but aside from topping your own high score, there's really no incentive to go back and play the levels once you've cleared them all. Also, that's not a backflip, are they stupid? So aside from missing some of the content that made the first game such a hit when it first came out, you might be wondering, hey, these actually don't look all that bad, what gives? Don't worry. It gets worse, like, to a surprising degree. The game starts off with the shittiest collage of logos I've ever seen, followed by another piece of shit intro, which for some reason is sped up. But, you know, complaints aside, I understand that this was the best they could do with the intro, because when you finally get to the main menu, you can see everything pretty much looks intact. I mean, aside from the menu being a little blurrier, but they probably had to compress that as well. Pretty much every original skater is back for the second go-round, and hey, they even added character customization, so we're gonna make our own skater this time. It might seem a little rudimentary, but this was a pretty big deal when it came out, because not only could you make your own custom skater, you're even able to make your own skate parks. Unfortunately, I couldn't stomach the idea of spending more time with this game than I had to, so I completely skipped that part. One thing I couldn't really understand is why selecting the letters for your username feels super sluggish. Maybe the devs understood how sensitive and shitty the D-pad is and added an input limit to keep you from skipping over letters repeatedly, but it's still kind of irritating. Enjoy the super refined controls of the PS1 version? Well, Activision figured you don't deserve that. The shallow D-pad makes button inputs more difficult than they need to be, with either your skater not responding at all when you just want to do a manual to keep your combo going, or causing you to crash by unintentionally doing either a special trick or double tap command, both of which require significantly more airtime than a simple kickflip or heel flip. Consequently, completing goals takes way longer because of the broken controls and terrible draw distance. These games shit directly on your face and then make you apologize for it. My best guess for why these ports are so bad and only get worse with each release is because Activision was probably like, hey, it, here's $10, go make a game. Oh, and don't even get me started on how broken and shitty the graphics are. The draw distance gets significantly worse every single game. Animations are also f***ed up, like this one. Seriously, this animation is so ass. Remember me mentioning the game's busted physics? Take the statue, for example. In the PS1 version, I almost never had any difficulty getting over it, and I approach every goal pretty much the same as I did for the N64 versions of this trilogy. It's crucial for not only collecting one of the many cache icons scattered throughout the level, but also for the purpose of clearing out the gap checklist. Good luck doing it here though, because thanks to the game's busted physics, jumping over the statue is next to f***ing impossible. What should have only taken 1 or 2 tries took several, until I was finally able to get the cache icon in the end. Speaking of cache icons, I find it a little weird Edge of Reality took it upon themselves to change the on-screen notifications whenever you collect them. Instead of telling you how much the icon was worth, the game says shit like 50 bucks, or 100 bucks, you're rich. 100 bucks is barely 10% of my rent. You'd be forgiven for thinking the trash cans in the Philadelphia levels are just a metaphor for including copies of the game as an end-level Easter egg. I mean, look at the f***ing seams in the environment. How is this even allowed? Why couldn't they get the train to move? So, with almost all my grievances towards this port aired out by this point in the video, you might be asking yourself what the reward for finishing every level with every goal with every gold medal might be. You ready? Nothing. Absolutely f***ing nothing. And it's not just like that for this game, but Pro Skater 3 as well. Graphic design was clearly their passion. I know it's a bit early on to go ahead and start criticizing the game, but when you can't even be bothered to give each logo its own screen with some kind of music to accompany it, instead of cramming every logo into one space, you can already get a pretty clear picture of the quality this title is about to deliver. Once again, we have another god-awful intro, but at least it's not sped up like the last one. But I can at least credit the devs for their consistency, because once again, there's yet another abrupt ending to the intro. The menu is pretty much identical to the PS1 versions, but considering they decided to make the character selection menu even more complicated than it needed to be, I'm not even going to bother with Create a Skater mode and skate as Tony Hawk this time around. Now, I'm doing this for two reasons. One, it's virtually identical to the one found in Pro Skater 2, and three, I don't want to waste any more time playing this than I already have to. Remember when I said the ports get progressively worse? I wasn't kidding. The textures are compressed even further than last time, the texture filtering is far worse, and sound effects are cut off by half a second, which was probably another way to try and save space. I have no f***ing idea. And just to add another irritating feature to the roster, sometimes you get flashing white lines at the sides of the screen that can only be reset by pausing. I'm not kidding. Other fun features include this one, where Tony straight up f***ing dies at the last second. Oh, that not good enough for you? How about here, where the board just straight up clips through the rail? Now, you might say, well, Trevor, to be totally fair, this was for a platform not many people were buying new games for. They probably just didn't see any real need to put in a lot of effort. To which I say, why the f*** would you even bother then? Surely Activision wasn't that f***ing greedy and thought shitting out what was likely a last-minute port wouldn't be even remotely worth it, right? Wait, never mind, they probably were that greedy.
It's not a liquid!
At this point in time, I'm sure you're probably starting to understand where this is headed. The rewards for finishing this game are pretty much nil, if not to an even lesser degree. After losing my save data and having no motivation to try and slog through this god-awful waste of shelf space a second time, I decided it wasn't worth it. And trust me when I say, you aren't missing anything. There are far better ways to enjoy these games, but if you're really hell-bent on giving these ports a go, you're more than likely to find them dirt cheap on eBay or at a local used game store next to an overpriced graded copy of Super Bowling.
Dude, this is ass!